For centuries, poison was a common method of killing, dating all the way back to the Roman Empire. It regained popularity in medieval Europe and again in the 1700s through to the 1900s. It is often a method preferred by women, who are 7 times more likely to murder by poison than men, in part because it is a discreet method that leaves little mess, as opposed to a beating or a gunshot. Although it is much easier now to identify poison in the system of a deceased individual, it doesn't always lead to an actual suspect. Join us for today's video as we examine 3 eerie cases of poisoning that remain unsolved to this day. Urooj Khan. 46-year-old Urooj Khan was an Indian immigrant living in Chicago since the 1980s. Described by his wife, Shabana Ansari, as a workaholic and a generous man, Urooj had built a brilliant life for himself in the US, opening up his first dry cleaning shop in 2004 and expanding his business over the next few years. Following his business success, he kicked his gambling habit, which mostly consisted of buying lottery tickets, and purchased multiple properties, most of which he let out. But everything changed for Urooj and his loved ones when he decided to buy 2 $30 scratch cards from a 7-Eleven in June of 2012, despite having vowed to stop. Upon scratching off his tickets, he yelled, "I hit $1 million!" He subsequently opted for a lump sum payment of about $600,000, around $425,000 after taxes. Since Illinois requires most winning ticket holders to appear for a news conference, partially to prove that the state pays out its prizes, Urooj went with his wife and daughter to collect his oversized check and pose for photographs. The event wasn't well attended, but by all accounts, the 46-year-old was very excited about his winnings, pledging to donate to St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital and put some of the money into his business. He stated, "Winning the lottery means everything to me." That night he had dinner with his wife, his daughter, and his father-in-law. Just hours later, though, he would be rushed to hospital. The next day he was pronounced dead. He was believed to have died from an arteriosclerotic cardiovascular disease, and nobody even considered ordering an autopsy because his death did not seem suspicious. The forensic pathologist who worked the case found no signs of trauma, and his blood work returned no opiates, alcohol, or carbon monoxide, leading to the ruling that his death was natural. Urooj's family, though, found his death to be suspicious, in particular his brother, Imtiaz Khan, who pleaded with authorities to take another look at the case, concerned that something was afoot because there were tensions in the family over Urooj's lottery win. Further testing revealed that Urooj had been given a fatal dose of cyanide, which caused the Chicago police to launch a homicide investigation and have the 46-year-old's body exhumed. Further examinations of the body, which included testing samples of the lungs, liver, and spleen, were inconclusive, however. While toxicology revealed there was cyanide in Urooj's blood, it was not found in his tissues or digestive system. The only thing found was a non-specific residue. However, experts have noted that the cyanide was likely no longer in the body, as it had been 6 months since his burial, stating, "Cyanide has a short half-life and may be lost over the post-mortem interval unless tissues are adequately preserved. In this case, due to the advanced putrefaction of the tissues, no cyanide was detected." Despite this new information, answers in Urooj's case never came. His brother expressed his frustration, stating, "I keep getting the same answer. They are looking for a witness. How long is it going to take? Who could be the witness?" A police source, however, said that the investigation was at a standstill because they believed someone close to the 46-year-old may know more than they are letting on. Since Urooj left no will, his family members fought over his estate. Ultimately, his daughter was given around $250,000 worth of property and 1/3 of his lottery winnings. His widow was given the dry cleaning business, worth over $1 million, and 2/3 of his winnings. Tensions between family members had been raised around the time that Urooj won the lottery. The IRS reportedly went to his home in 2011 to collect $120,000 in back taxes that his father-in-law owed, but were unable to gather the money. Following his death, Urooj's brother worried that his daughter, Jasmine, may not get her fair share of her father's assets, prompting him to take his brother's widower to court over the estate. After Urooj died, Jasmine, who was his daughter from a previous marriage, moved in with his sister and her husband. Urooj's widow, who was 32 at the time of his death, stated, "I want the truth to come out in the investigation. The sooner, the better. Who could be that person who hurt him?" She added, "It has been an incredibly hard time. We went from being the happiest the day we got the check. It was the best sleep I've had. And the next day, everything was gone." Urooj's case is still unsolved. The St. Croix Voodoo Murders. On the night of November 18th, 1988, authorities on the island of St. Croix were called to the scene of a minor traffic accident. A local woman named Radha Maharaj was the victim of the crime, seeming to have suffered from internal injuries. She was quickly transported to the hospital, but died en route. That same night, about 16 miles from the traffic accident, the body of a man was found. Chillingly, the man was Radha's husband, Krishnadath. The clothing of both individuals was soaked in seawater, and it was discovered that they'd both succumbed to cyanide poisoning. Adding further mystery to their deaths was the fact that around $25,000 in cash that the couple had purportedly borrowed was missing. Cyanide poisoning on the island was rare, but the deaths of the Maharajas brought the number up to 5 since 1984. Since the poison was used so infrequently, investigators began to suspect that all 5 deaths were linked, and possibly connected to voodoo or obeah rituals. While voodoo is not inherently dangerous, hexes and curses are used in what is called obeah. The unidentified killer of the couple, and the man responsible for 3 other murders on the island, has been dubbed the Obeah Man. Authorities believe that this man pretends to be a practitioner of voodoo rituals and agrees to perform in exchange for money. In the months leading up to their deaths, the Maharajas, who owned a local grocery store, took out a loan to help expand their business. However, they struggled to pay it back. According to Radha's daughters, who helped run the store, the couple began receiving daily phone calls from an unidentified man. He would ask to speak with their stepfather, who would then tell them to wait outside while he spoke to the caller in private. 3 weeks before the couple were killed, they brought home $25,000 in cash, which they had borrowed from numerous relatives. When asked about the cash, Radha told their daughters that they needed the money to pay the harassing caller. She gave no identifying information about the man, nor any further details about the arrangement. One of the daughters recalled, "They were very tense, especially when I spoke to my mother about what they were doing. She didn't like for me to ask some of those things, and she tried to answer me as quickly as possible and then changed the subject." In a separate instance, the girls questioned their mother again. She told us that this is what they had to pay the gentleman, so I asked her, "Well, why?" She said, "Well, don't ask me any questions. By Monday, you will know what it's all about." On the day of the murders, Radha left the family home at 7:30 p.m. and drove her car east. Her daughters noticed because it was out of character for her to go off by herself at night. Their stepfather followed suit at 8 p.m., driving his car in the opposite direction. The events of the next few hours are unclear until 9:30 p.m. when Radha's vehicle was spotted near a local beach. It was described as coasting with nobody controlling it. When authorities showed up, they found her unconscious and near death. Krishnadath, meanwhile, was discovered wearing just his trousers. At first glance, there was some suspicion of suicide, a result of their struggling business and difficult financial situation. But when the results came in that the couple had died of cyanide poisoning, it was clear that there was a link between these murders and the previous cyanide poisoning deaths. The first poisoning took place in 1984. The victim was 38-year-old Haig Caesar, who was found dead in his car on the morning of May 24th, with the post-mortem concluding that he had died from cyanide poisoning. Over the course of their investigation, authorities learned that in the weeks leading up to his death, Haig had connected with an unknown man who had told him that there were jars of coins hidden around his property. He said that spirits guarded the jars and he could help get rid of them. It would cost Haig $100,000. Once he had enough money, the man said, he could give Haig a potion to help him find the coins. Law enforcement suspects that this potion contained the cyanide which killed Haig. His wife later explained, "When I found out about all the money he was borrowing and all the cash that he had taken out of our accounts and everything without even letting me know, I was really very angry about it. I was shocked overall, just shocked that he would have taken it so far." The second poisoning occurred 2 years later, in 1986. Edsel Stryden and Carmen Torres, like the Maharajas, were small business owners who had a local bar and had recently taken out a loan. Edsel and Carmen took their loan in $54,000 worth of cash. On September 13th, they climbed into their car and drove off. 3 hours later, Carmen was found dead about half a mile from where Radha was discovered in 1989. Her partner was located in a truck at a nearby beach. Both Carmen and Edsel had died from cyanide poisoning, and their $54,000 in cash was missing. Little progress has been made in the cases since the 1980s. The murders have never been solved, and the killer remains at large. Authorities have no description of him, other than that he has a heavy French West Indian accent. They added that he likely travels throughout the US, as well as the Caribbean. Patsy Wright. 43-year-old Patsy Wright was described as a head-turner with a big smile and an easy laugh. A talented equestrian, she was also a savvy and wealthy businesswoman who owned the Great Southwest Wax Museum and had recently purchased a 30-acre ranch in Aledo, Texas, where she planned to keep her horses and live a more rural lifestyle. On the night of October 22nd, 1987, Patsy drove to her home in Arlington after a rehearsal for the Wax Museum's Halloween show, but she was unable to sleep. At around 3 a.m., she took a dose of NyQuil in the hopes that it would tire her out, but unbeknownst to Patsy, it had been laced with strychnine, a colorless and bitter substance that is known to produce incredibly painful reactions in humans. Symptoms of exposure to the poison include muscle spasms and full-body convulsions, hypothermia, unconsciousness, and paralysis of the neural pathways, which leads to asphyxiation. Those exposed to strychnine typically die within 2 to 3 hours. It is generally considered an exceptionally cruel method of murder. The following day, friends and family were alerted to the news that Patsy had died. Her daughter, Leslie, recalled the moment that she learned of her mother's death. She was so alive, she was so healthy, there was nothing wrong with her, and when it happened, you're just in awe, because you would never ever have expected that to happen to her. It was Patsy's sister and brother-in-law who'd made the discovery. Sally Horning had been woken up in the early hours of the morning by a phone call from her sister, who told her that she'd taken some cold medicine and was feeling unwell, before collapsing while still on the phone. Sally woke her husband, and the two rushed to the 43-year-old's home, breaking down the door and finding her in the bedroom. Sally recalled, "She just looked like she had kind of fainted, and so I thought, that's what's happened. And so we tried to get her up, and that didn't work." Since nothing was amiss at the scene, nobody was aware at the time that Patsy's death had been intentional. It wasn't until after her funeral that a routine post-mortem was carried out, revealing that she had been poisoned with strychnine. Since Sally mentioned that her sister had consumed cold medicine before bed, the bottle in her home was tested, showing that it contained the poison. Notably, the strychnine used in the killing was in pure powder form, the most concentrated type available. Few retailers sold such a thing, and investigators hoped that someone would remember making the sale, but it doesn't appear that anyone ever came forward. Law enforcement ruled out product tampering and suicide, and labelled the death a homicide. Authorities found it suspicious that Patsy's burglar alarm had not been set on the night she died, and also observed that only those close to the 43-year-old were aware of her habit of taking cold medication when she couldn't sleep. Initially, police were very wary of Sally and Steve. They noted that Sally and Patsy owned the wax museum together, and now the 43-year-old was dead, it would be run by the married couple, giving them a very handsome income. Friends had also told the police that Patsy didn't like Steve, accusing him of spending Sally's inheritance and putting the couple into debt. She attempted to make arrangements should anything happen to her or Sally, wherein Steve would not get their money from the museum or inherit the museum itself, but died several weeks before she could speak to Sally about her feelings. The day before she died, she reportedly stated that she didn't want Steve anywhere around her. Investigators also knew, though, that Steve had attempted to resuscitate his sister-in-law by giving her mouth-to-mouth, and they knew that if he was the killer, it would be risky to do so, knowing there was poison in her system. Steve had told paramedics that during CPR, a lot of green fluid came up from her, and I would continually spit that out onto the bed, or there was a towel there, as I remember. But paramedics disputed Steve's statements, claiming that clear liquid came out of Patsy's mouth, not green, and one paramedic in particular argued that Steve did not correctly perform the CPR, causing some suspicion that Steve had purposely not carried out correct CPR or that he and Sally had lied about him doing any at all. Several family members, including Sally and Steve, were issued polygraph tests. They all passed. Patsy's ex-husband, Robert Cox, was also interviewed. He was given the option to take a polygraph but declined. Police found Robert an interesting character because Patsy had sought out a restraining order against him, claiming he had been harassing her during their separation, including telling her that he knew people who could snuff someone out. Patsy was also due to testify against Robert, who was engaged in a civil suit with his insurance company. He had been accused of purposely setting fire to his warehouse in 1983, and Patsy's testimony, by all accounts, was a real spanner in the works for Robert. She died just over a week before the trial began, and Robert won the case. Still, no evidence was found to connect Robert to Patsy's death. The only real clue in the case, besides the laced cold medicine, was the possibility that someone had been with Patsy that night, which police felt was indicated by the 2 empty dinner plates on a tray near her bed. Authorities speculated that she had had someone over before bed that night, someone who presumably knew her well, since they were over so late. One report does state that Patsy had a boyfriend of sorts, but it's unclear if he was the individual who was there that night, as she was also seeing other people. Another suspect in the case was Bill and Bonnie Alexander, the couple who boarded Patsy's horses. Her family suspected the pair when they learned that the horses were in their name rather than Patsy's, and that they received a check from Patsy the day before her death. The Alexanders filled in the amount as $4,000, even though a friend recalled that they'd asked Patsy if she had any outstanding checks. The friend was helping the 43-year-old with her finances, and she said that she didn't. Bonnie Alexander claimed that the horses were in their names to prevent Steve from gaining access to them should anything happen to Patsy, and added that the $4,000 check was to cover not just boarding fees, but also contest entry fees. Patsy's family, meanwhile, have suggested that Bill Alexander took a shine to her and killed her when she rejected him. It's unclear why they think this, though, as there is no evidence to support the theory. There isn't even any evidence that their relationship was anything but professional. The only thing investigators could think that would have a potential link to the Alexanders is that strychnine was sometimes used to treat horses. Ultimately, the Alexanders took polygraph tests and passed, which seemed to satisfy authorities. The final suspect in the case was a former boyfriend of Patsy's named Leo Fikes. Leo was the owner of a chemical company, leading to some speculation that he may have had access to the poison. Furthermore, the relationship reportedly broke down after Patsy told Leo that she didn't want to get married. An anonymous caller informed police that Leo had dated an Arlington woman who had been murdered in 1987, though it doesn't seem that much came from this. Leo claimed that he had not been close to Patsy in months, and that when he'd seen her, it was out in public in passing. Investigators later determined that Leo's company didn't manufacture or have access to strychnine, and he passed a polygraph test. The day after Patsy died, a woman called her daughter and asked to speak with the 43-year-old. When Leslie told her her mother was unavailable, the caller ignored her and insisted she speak with Patsy. Finally, Leslie said that her mother had died recently. The caller reportedly responded, "Well, good, I wanted her dead." Leslie subsequently hung up the phone. It's unclear to this day if that was a prank call or something more sinister. Patsy and Sally's wax museum burned down in 1988. While it was initially suspected that a faulty electrical box caused the fire, the cause was later changed from accidental to undetermined, with some investigators believing that arson may have been the cause due to how quickly it spread, though no tests were done to find out if an accelerant was used. The original investigation files were stolen from a locked drawer in a locked room at the Grand Prairie Fire Department. They have never been found. Patsy's murder and the exact nature of the later warehouse fire remain unsolved. And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment down below with your own theories and speculations, and remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.